Welcome back to another edition of The Cabinet. And joining me in the cabinet today is none other than the uppity Negro, Josh Lazard. Welcome back to Cabinet.
Hello. Good morning.
I think it's, it's appropriate for as I have this discussion, well, and we're all talking about this discussion and what's happened. I think now, usually at this time of the year, I am like ready to do some reflection. And I have not found myself even being able to like begin reflecting on this year and what the year, how I felt throughout the year, how I feel, what I learned. I don't even want to review what I learned this year just yet. Um, so I guess we can start here. We're wrapping up the year of unexpectation. Um, but I think most people can identify some things that they've changed because or decisions that they've made. What this year, what was something that you decided to do that was motivated, or maybe that was not in your plans for 2020?
Well, sure. I kind of walked into 2020 with some personal things up in the air in terms of jobs and future prospects and whatnot. I actually decided to make a friend over Zoom. I went back to school this year, and knowing that school was going to be, was going to be done through distance learning, I actually decided to like reach out to somebody through Zoom, and try to form community that way. And that was something that's not normal and natural to me. Um, my friend group is pretty solid, but they don't live here, and I just moved to a new city in late August. So that's something that's been unexpected, and it's been an unexpected positive thing in my life.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. For me, I would probably say that I still have not been able to pinpoint what that is. I know that I will make some life decisions going forward. I know that at the beginning of this year, I lived across the street from a hospital. I can tell you that I will never do that again, just
yeah.
because you can't really call. Or I don't think it would have bothered me unless there was a pandemic. But like, and even there's certain things. I think I will probably wear a mask for the rest of my life. Um,
Really?
I am like I just feel like I think in close friend circles and things like that I'll be
Yeah.
okay. But I think when I transition from place to place, I will probably have a mask with me just because I think that
Interesting.
I cringe every time I see old footage of people too close. Like if I'm watching
Yeah.
something, especially if it's like shot in New York City or something like that, and they are standing close to each other or over each other, I just I don't know if I'll be
So
able to
you're
shake
so
that
what
because
I hear
I'm
you saying
always
is
going to think that there's something there.
what I hear you saying is the next concert you go to, you're gonna wear a mask in the year 2023 or 2024 or 2025.
Basically, basically,
Interesting.
and I'm sure that that's up for evaluation, and I can reevaluate that later. It's not a concrete at all, but it's just something that I think going forward. I've had a conversation with, and I've always been a little bit of a germaphobe, so I think, and I'm a tad bit OCD, so that all of it just. I don't know about that. But that said, I think that right now, one of the main discussions that's happening or not happening, people have made up their minds already, is about the COVID vaccine. And I'm weary to say it that way because it is a vaccine for COVID. However, it is manufactured by a number of different people, and we don't have the same vaccine all across the world. Different countries have different vaccines. If I'm being honest, if because of the way that it's been presented, I'm not skeptical. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I feel like I have to start every conversation about this saying that. Start every tweet or any thought that I put out there. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I know that the majority of the people that I interact with have been multi-vaccinated, so they're not really anti-vaxxers either. and I'm not even going there, but I think that if I had a wish, we'll talk about it, the vaccine specifically, and what the response has been and why people are responding that way. But if I had a wish, especially with all of these different manufacturers, um, one thing that we're able to do right now when I buy a new iPhone, um, there's like a comparison chart. Which one do I want? And this is all from one manufacturer, right? Apple's going to tell me that this one has these features and these specs. And I would love to have seen a chart, a comparison chart of the difference between the Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Pfizer vaccines, just so I know. Not that I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I am not trying to make medical decisions for anybody else. But I feel like with all of these different manufacturers, if I had a wish, I would like to have at least seen a chart. And I get a little confused with like he's taking the vaccine. Every time I hear that, I wonder which one. And what does that actually mean? But I was hanging with a friend yesterday, and he told me he got the Moderna vaccine. He feels fine, which I'm not really expecting people not to feel a certain way after you get after I've gotten vaccinated in the past. I really haven't had a long-term side effects. I think any shot you feel a little sore sometimes. Um, but I think it's fair to talk anxiety or what gives you anxiety around the vaccine. Um, I don't know that we've talked about this before. Where do you stand when it comes to um, not just being vaccinated, but where we are with the vaccine collectively?
Sure. I'm also not an anti-vaxxer. I famously had 6 vaccination shots at the beginning of the school year because I was not able to produce my records and I needed to register for classes with less than 24 hours. So I was at CVS and I got 6 shots, all the way going back to chickenpox as if I've never
Even
had
for
chickenpox.
virtual, even in a virtual environment, you still needed
Yeah,
those
because
shots.
I still need to show up on campus for like library visits and occasional, drop in on campus for like to take care of some things. So I counted as on campus. And I also went in and got the flu shot. And this was again back in August. So I had 3 shots in each arm. My arms were sore
Oh wow.
for about a week. Yeah,
Definitely not an anti-vaxxer.
definitely not. And I need to actually have just scheduled because I have to get some booster shots for at least 2 of them right now. I think people need to recognize people travel all the time. People have gotten travel vaccinations. Like this is actually part of our culture, and for the people that don't do so and I'm going to qualify this by saying legitimate reasons, perhaps around religious beliefs or whatnot. Fine, but I do think it is incumbent upon the rest of us because for so many people, they actually can't take the shots, even if they wanted to. For they will, they always consistently have allergic reactions to these things. My mother's allergic to eggs. She
Mm.
could not take, I know, one of the shots when we did travel somewhere. So I actually don't even know if my mother can actually even take the shot, at least out of the current ones. Because again, right, like you said, I don't know where they are in terms of like, what formulas
And
because
that's a
they've been made
legitimate
in.
allergy. Like I know
That's a
I know other
legitimate
people
allergy.
that are allergic to eggs. Right? It's real.
Hmm.
So, and I think that's a totally understandable reason not to get one, or that you can't get one. If this thing is going to cause an allergic
Yeah.
reaction for you that's more adverse to you than possibly not catching this.
So
Um,
which it means for me, it's incumbent upon the rest of us to make sure that we are vaccinated so that people like my mother, the people that are allergic to latex, I think there's some latex that might be in some of the some of the needles. It's incumbent upon the rest of us to make sure we get vaccinated so people like my mother reduce their chance because of herd immunity. Yes, and also on part of this, the federal government has completely abdicated all of its, responsibility around that. I'm specifically talking about out of the executive branch of government to be able to produce and roll, not produce, but excuse me, roll these things out in a coherent and intelligent manner so that news organizations can carry a coherent message, that goes all the way from Miami, Florida, all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska, that all of us
right.
understand what is going on here, that we're talking the same language, we're talking about the same way. Whereas right now, these things are being left up to the states. Like for the first time in my life, I'm like, I'm glad our states have been intact, all 50 of them, because the governors are taking on a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure that their states are understanding how these things are being rolled out. I remember back in the day when I'm showing my age, but when 9/11 happened, even with the George Bush administration, we had those terror threat levels that were like color coded. People kind of made fun of them and lampooned them, but guess what? It made sense. It worked. People understood, how to talk about it. We used the same language, and we couldn't get that here, and it's unfortunate.
And honestly, I feel like we say that like it's that. Well, a lot of people thought that those terror levels were extreme, and to your point, they made fun of them. Were really have pay attention to what's going on. And I think had we had something like this during you know the what was the initial
Right, because we're back in another
scare,
one.
right? Yeah, like when people were like dying. I mean, well, in my case, outside my window, over and over again, and then I see, in other parts of the country, there is no general awareness at all. That's a little concerning, and so I think that there's a multitude of things that we could have done differently, things that we have not done, and I think that is what it is when it comes to. I mean, I think about vaccinations. I recently went to Brazil, obviously not this year, and I also needed to get vaccinated, the yellow fever shot, and some other like typhoid things that could kill me if I didn't get these. I think not a slight at all, but I think that people that have left the country, that have been places that have required them to have these vaccines, these same people are, some of them are a little anxious about the COVID vaccine. And I think if I had to give like a well-rounded thought around why you may have some issues or I think the time that and the time that the evaluation period was very short,
Hmm.
and I think that gives people anxiety. I understand that, while in the past that a solid vaccines may have taken 8 to 12 years, and with the advances in technology, that should be significantly shorter. I do get the confusion around like how do you know that there are no long-term effects, and you
Yeah.
shorten that period. And if like, not saying that I'm not an anti-vaxxer is important, if there's one tweet that has stuck with me throughout this entire ordeal though, I saw a tweet and I can't shake this one. He's like, we're all going to be sitting around in 2030. We'll be watching a commercial and it'll say, if you took the COVID-19 vaccine in 2020, you may be entitled to compensation. And as soon as I saw that tweet,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, I really had to stop and think, because that could literally happen. And
Yeah.
nobody is, like
So
you could be
this is
sitting on your couch then, like, damn, I don't feel any type of way. But
Yeah, I think one of the things again that I'm really laying this at the feet of the federal government for not, coherently getting their message out. From what I understood and what I have read, and I'm doing this literally from legitimate sources, not just what I read on Twitter. Here, they ramped up the
I was going to
number
ask
of
you
people.
what YouTube link you got this information.
That they ramped up the number of persons involved in studies. So whereas they might have had numbers, less than 50 or something, it's like they were actually in the tens of thousands at some levels. I think, well, let me not say that exact number, but like they had certainly ramped up the numbers of persons in studies. So they had a bigger sample to pull from than normal, because they usually have time to wait and walk these things out. But trying to make sure they had a strong enough sample so that they can say with some level of certification that this is what will happen. But I'm saying like those are small details that I think actually make a difference to an American public that is anxious about this. That feels as though, quote unquote, it was rushed. It feels as though maybe not everything was taken into consideration, about side effects and whatnot, what might happen later on. And I do think another thing that I don't know, I've not followed up on this one. Mitch McConnell was actually trying to get legislation introduced and passed. I don't know if it's in this last stimulus book because it's 5,000 pages. God knows what's in there. That would actually prevent people from suing companies and organizations for the distribution, so that they wouldn't be held liable in case something like that happened in the year 2030. That the American people would not be able to sue. Like, this is why people don't trust these things, because they know.
Well, that move alone strips the confidence that people would that you're asking people to have in the government, right? So when you are looking to pass legislation, and that was not a silent story, right? Even if you just glance at news in passing, the headlines were succinct enough for you to see that Mitch McConnell actually wants to prevent you from suing if something does happen to you, like if there are adverse effects or like long-term ramifications, ailments that come upon you because you participated, or not even participated, but willingly took this vaccine. And that it just doesn't instill confidence in citizens. It doesn't instill confidence in communities. And so I think it's hard to peddle that message. In that same token, though, I think a lack of information and us being in the misinformation age is something that we talk about on the cabinet constantly, something that I bring up all the time. But also, when you know a little bit of information, and this is my argument during political seasons all the time, misinformation is very powerful, because when you know a little information, you start speaking on the little that you know. And so you kind of come from that angle of, well, I heard this, and it's worse than the game of telephone, because like what you heard is kind of muddied with what you may have skimmed over and information that you may have retained from when you were in high school, then kind of pieced it, like you made it make sense when it came out, but it may not have been true, but it will be regurgitated. And I think that's the danger there. So I think a lot of the anxiety in the Black community has been because of the Tuskegee study, that the syphilis study that the United States public health system did there. I think, and I can't even tell you how many times I've heard people that I know don't read books, that I know that they don't know history. And I'm not, like I said, this is not a slight, but I know that you don't read. I know that you probably haven't read anything intentionally in at least 20 years. And so for you to be, and I also know that you might be reckless with what you do and what you eat. Like I think there's tons of arguments. We are out here, or y'all are out here eating McRibs, and there's no telling what's in a McRib. Again, no slight to McDonald's. I don't know anything about the ingredients. I do know that when I looked up the definition of McRib, and when it came back this time, it said like a pork piece. Like they literally said those words, like pork piece. Like, I don't even know what that means. So you will rush to get a McRib, but there's like a slew of doctors that are standing here telling you that I usually would dedicate, a month out of my year to vaccine research. I've canceled my schedule, and I've dedicated my whole year. And I've worked with other doctors that have dedicated their whole year to the study of this vaccine alone. It's safe, from what we know. And you take that, and I don't know. So that said, what happened in Tuskegee is concerning. I don't want to take away from that at all. What happened in Tuskegee, if you're not really familiar with the Tuskegee study that was done on Black men when they were experiment. I usually use that word.
So here's my challenge to that, though. If you say study, a study is what? An experiment. You're doing research. I disagree a little bit with some of the current ways in which we're talking about that, like trying to better understand what happened in Tuskegee, I do think experiment is an appropriate term because you all were studying this. You all were trying to see what the effects were if you do not treat human beings with penicillin once it came out in 1947, and you all knew that this was an effective cure for syphilis. You all want to see what the end effects were all the way until death.
I think to that point, you're absolutely right. This wasn't this was an experiment. It was a cruel experiment.
It was a cruel experiment.
And you also, what I say specifically about Tuskegee is it was intentionally cruel, and they wanted these men to die because they wanted to see when they were going to die. Right. Yeah, how long it's going to take them to die, but they were counting on, which means they had no value on their lives at all. And I think that is what people should take away from that that entire story. But I do when it comes to the parallel between the United States specifically, and I want to say the United States and the Tuskegee experiment are synonymous. And the United States and the COVID vaccine, what parallels do you see there?
Well, I see the parallels of a public health response that was bungled and a public health response that led to mistrust and led to distrust of the federal government to quote unquote take care of its citizens to the best of its ability. And I think also, at least for Black people, it's not just the Tuskegee experiment. It's also COINTELPRO. It is also, the Mississippi study. I think what was it called? Something that happened in Mississippi during the Civil Rights, and Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission. All of these moments in which the actual government, one takes the state government, but a government intentionally was turning against its own citizens, and its own citizens just so happen to be Black Americans. It leads to distrust. It leads to mistrust. It leads to these deep-seated ideas, like at least in the case for Black people, the conspiracy was actually true. Yes. I think we need to understand that, like, why some of these conspiracy theories take hold so much within Black communities. It's the move bombing, in Philadelphia as well. Like these actual real cases in which elected officials. The state turned against
this was not a conspiracy. Well, to your point,
yeah.
Right? It's not that the conspiracy was true.
It's not a conspiracy. It just happened.
It's not a conspiracy. This really did happen, and so let's move aside from the science and talk about what else you do to Black people as the government entity. And now you want to tell them, and I do understand that it's hard. Where do you think? If there was a commission, I don't know what Joe's doing. I'm honestly somewhere between the holidays,
yeah, I know.
and the fact that election season probably is not going to stop in my lifetime. So I think it will just always be election season now, just because of what's going on. So trying to self-care and kind of rejuvenate to be able to have these discussions, because the discussions have to happen, the facilitation of the conversations have to happen, and then the confidence for the community has to happen. So somebody has to give the community that confidence. Where does that begin? Who does that begin with? Where does that start? Who do Black people trust aside from the Shade Room?
Yeah, the Breakfast Club, and again, I don't mean that in a shady way toward either one, but we're at a very, very low point when it comes to intellectual discussion within this country. And it's not just amongst Black people. I mean, like, this is just across the board. We were obviously, on a downward turn, I think, as Obama was in office, 2008. And prayerfully, the Trump administration was the nadir of that. Hopefully, we will see some digging out of this. But, I mean, the Biden administration has a very heavy task of restoring trust of the American federal government to the American people. And I don't even know if not so much that Joe himself or Kamala isn't up for the task, but I don't even know if you can repair that in 4 years. Because, like, at this point, we're talking about.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that it can be repaired in 4 years. I also do not believe that, Joe wanted. A lot of people were like, "Oh, Joe's going to bring us back to normal." Joe, in some instances, is like, "We're going to go back to normal." I don't think
Mhm.
normal is where we need to go. If we go back to
Mhm.
normal, we will be back here, and
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
and we will stay here. But people, and this is an entirely different show. People do not respect knowledge right now. They don't
No.
really, because there's no integrity. There's there are integrity problems, and so that in turn is why we have knowledge problems.
But like,
Further
I
than
mean,
that, we also have comprehension problems. So
but I think this issue of trust is there, and I mean, I don't want to diverge too far away from talking about COVID and Tuskegee experiment. But when we watch a Trump administration continually get file lawsuits at state level and even at the Supreme Court and see them denied, I mean, we're not even going to entertain this to the point of even giving this a hearing. And then the response is the courts are also against us. So not only is quote unquote Dominion and Joe and all these other state, actors against Trump administration, now it's also the courts. So what does that do? That also then begins the process of eroding, whatever trust that people have in the courts. And I don't be clear and say not so much the criminal justice system. That's a whole other, conversation, particularly as it pertains to Black people. But there are
it is, and I want to before we I want you to keep going. I want to
yeah.
put a pin in that because I know that Christian is listening. I also want to come back to that because the lack of confidence that you put into the courts, that's going to have a long lasting effect
Long
as
term
well.
effect.
So if the Biden administration, this is just an example. Like I said, this is definitely another show that I want to come back to. But if the Biden administration is not intent on restoring that trust, but they do start to seek justice on behalf of Black and brown lives, and that justice goes to the courts, but there's no confidence in the courts, that justice will still never happen. And
Agreed. Agreed.
that's a my mind has gone there a couple times. Like if there's no lack of trust, then when white people are convicted for the crimes that they actually do commit, said party will not believe that those convictions are just, and they will also believe that they are agenda based because there is not a lack there's a lack of trust in the Justice Department, which is something that we have to really start talking about before 4 years passes us by, and there's no telling what happens after that. But back to what you were saying, I think that we have to be really intentional. Who are the mouthpieces? And I ask you,
Mhm.
as somebody that understands communication, you
Mhm.
understand culture,
Mhm.
our culture specifically. Where does this conversation need to happen? And who's gonna when is it going to start? Like when are we going to start having these combos?
Yeah, maybe on Clubhouse. I'm not sure. I mean, that's a very new platform, and
Oh,
I'm
I
not.
hate to hear that. I really hate
Yeah,
to hear
I
that.
mean, I'm kind of with you. Like, I would hate to hear that, like, Clubhouse becomes if it happens, great. Do I have high hopes? Absolutely not. Um, I, I want to be honest with you. When I survey the landscape, I do not see the places that traditionally we're doing that type of work that where knowledge was at least celebrated and knowledge was talked about and exchanges, fair enough exchanges of dialogue and discussion happen, not just debates left and right. I don't see those traditional places have more or less gone away, and I don't see the creation of new places where it's happening. And I'm gonna give my example. Forgive me for standing on my soapbox. Really care about these things, but when we lost the state of the Black Union, now we can we can debate and argue as far as maybe who was on those platforms, but we let's not deny the fact that like Tavis could pull a meeting together. Like we were talking about 20,000 people in the building. Like that's a lot of Black folk just to show up to have a dialogue and to actually listen to what people actually have to say. Those days are gone by, and I for me, there's a direct connection to the fact that when that went away, we have the Breakfast Club. I got my issues with maybe some of the tenor of those conversations on there, but For what it's worth,
Well,
that is a
we have the
great.
Breakfast Club, and we still have Ricky Smiley.
Yes, and Ricky Smiley. I mean, and for what it's worth, Alex, we also have Unmuted Nation. Like, I do think that this is the type of work that is meaningful to me, which is why I pull up, to be able to have these actual dialogues with one another because we don't always agree on everything, and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't think quote unquote black people are not a monolith. Like, we do not have to agree on every single thing all of the time. But I guess my only hope for this is we read more books. Like, we really do find ways to be intentionally inform one another about these things
But
and to have
so
dialogue.
I'm 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 with you. I think reading books is important, and I think if you're not going to read books, listen to it. We listen to everything else. If you're on Clubhouse and you
Yeah,
can listen, you can really go on Audible and get a book and listen to it, and really like you. And I think it's so vital right now. I think you're spot on with Tavis, and I think a lot of these platforms have either lost their credibility.
mhm,
Like Tavis definitely had the ability, and there was not they didn't agree, which is why I was interested in watching in those
yep,
days, right? I
yep.
think you could see some viable discussions happening. And and I appreciate you for mentioning us. My hope, especially in this year, this was all created really because of I had an idea, but it went this way because of COVID. And so, as I hope that this becomes a place that we are able to have those discussions, and that's the true desire and intent, and it has to be amplified, and we're working on that. But I think you're right. The places that we go traditionally to get this knowledge, and these
Yeah,
centers, especially in our community, it's been faith centers over and over and over again. But you have faith leaders, and again, not as like just really the facts that are arguing with the housewives of Potomac,
seriously, yeah.
and like you literally lack credibility, so you can't have this conversation when people are more so focused on your dick, and I don't have another way to say that. But you really you can't be a leader in this space and have those viable conversations that are
Yeah.
going to help the community when they're focused on that.
So can
I
I
couldn't
call
have
names?
those conversations if people were focused on mine, and that's
Can,
yes,
can I call names? This
absolutely.
particular summer, when brother Michael Todd, pastor, was it Transformation Church? He was going, his sermon series were going viral. And I decided to just look, because I was like, I want to be informed. Before I really say something about this man and his mission, was let me be informed. So he was peddling his own book. And I just remember I was just like, wow, we're in this new world. Because he said, I don't read. I haven't read many books, but the Lord called me to write a book. And I was like, this has to be like the most anti-intellectual approach to forms of knowledge. Because like when you say that to me, and I'll admit I said this from a particular point of academic privilege, but like I don't want to read your book because you don't even know what you're talking about. Because you literally said out loud, I don't read. So I'm like, what are you
I don't
basing what
read.
you wrote on in the first place? Like I really question your basis of knowledge. Like, dude. And my thing is, and he's popular. His book is going to sell. People are going to buy it. People are going to listen to him. That is the world we live in. Like that is just unfortunately where we are with this.
That
Yeah,
saddens
what
me.
do you
It
say?
saddens
Yeah,
me
that's what I'm saying.
because
Like, what
there's
else can you
no
say?
there's I don't I don't really know what else to say, or I can't. It's also hard to argue with somebody that is very fat. They believe that they have facts, but they
Yes,
don't read,
they don't
or this
read.
is a fact and they double down on that fact, or they preach that fact. They stand their on popular platforms
Mhm.
and peddle nonsense, or not just conspiracies, but just foolishness. And so you can't argue with and I don't know. This discussion goes on and on, but I think that there can't be a reckoning when there's when people don't even accept the truth. And so I think I, I struggle with my. I'm not struggling with my words. I'm struggling with my youth not having wanting to use expletives to describe my frustration
Yeah,
with where we are and why, these conversations aren't happening. And I think it has to start. It has to start slow. Any movement is never going to be the masses that are moving things anyway. And
Yeah.
so, do believe that if a solid group of like-minded individuals get on the same page, there can be an information overhaul. And I think that traditionally our people are more successful with information.
So I will say this. I know it can be pretty bleak. Now, I struggle at times to look at places for America writ large where places still care about knowledge. But I do want to peddle this to say, there's the anti-lynching museum that's in Montgomery, Alabama. Those are places that exist. The Schomburg Center in New York, like that is a place that still exists. HBCUs, like I want to sit up and say, like those are not slack places where black forms of black knowledge is not only exists but is also celebrated, like forms of understanding culture and those things. So like it's not completely zero, but the thing is the redundancies that used to exist within culture around news information, around faith places, like those places have definitely eroded in recent decades, to the point where it's like if you haven't found yourself in one of those very few places, like it's like you're shit out of luck. And that's just that part saddens me.
Because you have to pick up a book. You really, that's the only way. It's really the only way. And I'm not. This is not. This is not reading Rainbow. I'm not really peddling. I don't even have what to tell you to pick up because I don't want to be that person. But what I'm saying is, it is hard because coming back to the vaccine, and a lot of people are confused, but they are confident in this knowledge, and they don't. To that point, there are a lot of people that don't get the flu shot. Also because of misinformation, and they've never gotten it, or they've gotten it one time and they were like, well, it gave me the flu. And it's like you can't really understand the incubation period. I'm somebody that gets the flu shot. It did not give me autism. It did not put me on the spectrum. I don't have any, there's nothing happening with me. There was 1 year, and I've been getting it consistently for at least almost 10 years, right? So, and I know that I don't miss it. There was 1 year that I did get the flu. But if you understand the incubation period, it takes, just like the COVID vaccine, takes about 2 days for even the first dose to really get into your system. So if I had already contracted the flu, then I could have already had it, and the vaccination makes no difference. To that point, the misinformation is so strong, people think that once they have the vaccine, they can go do whatever they want. And I think that's also, I put a simple post out a week ago. A vaccine is not a cure. It's not the same thing. But again, these types of these pieces of information that I say make no sense if you don't already have the basic knowledge of what words mean.
Yeah, or science even. I mean, I need people to do better with, again, knowledge and their information. I mean, like every year prior to COVID, being this global pandemic, they always said there are different strains to influenza. Scientists are like, we think this is probably going to be the most virulent strain for this upcoming flu season. Therefore, our vaccine will be best towards this one. You might get another strain, which means you might get sick, but the likelihood of you being as sick is less because you already have something. I mean, but I guess I'm like, that's basic knowledge, because we all know, why do you keep on getting a cold every time? Why do you always get colds? Because there's a different strain of a cold, because it's a virus. But your body builds up an immune system, which is why you get to certain age, you don't get as many colds as you did when you were younger. We know this information. This is basic science in terms of the American public and knowing these things. But suddenly,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. We should know. I agree with you, Ben. We should know. We don't know. We don't know this information. We don't know it. And so there's all these assumptions that have been made. What made it worse is that we had a public administration, an administration that publicly also knows nothing. You know,
Knows
we
nothing.
had the czar of the coronavirus task force that was in denial about HIV when he ran a state.
Completely.
So
Yeah.
when this is the actual case, I don't think that we can really be surprised. But then people are surprised when they do contract it, and or die, when somebody in their community dies and you've been in denial for 9 months. It was very rampant. From my understanding, I was watching some nurses explain that in South Dakota that the people had so much disbelief that COVID even existed. When they tested positive, they told the doctor, "No, I don't have it. You're wrong." And this
Are they
was
seeing
literally
things
this was literally
as though
happening.
they are?
The
They rebuked
nurses
it?
were like they literally were like they would believe that they would prefer lung cancer over COVID. And I'm like, and
I,
this is where we are. And so as we start to move out of this place, like, I think we have to continue having these conversations. I will keep having these conversations. But you know what, where, and I guess a better question is, how do people start? Because Jasmine comes on the cabinet often, and she's like, sometimes people don't seek education because they feel bad, you know. And so I know that I probably made somebody feel bad in the last 10 minutes of what I said, and you feel real dumb, and I do understand. But where, this is never my intent. I don't want to make you feel dumb.
sure.
But I think if we could collectively guide people into like a place that they could begin, where do you begin? And I don't we'll pull some resources together just to talk about basic health and
Yeah.
basic science and basic because we teach, at least we taught. I don't know what's taught these days, but we taught about vaccinations. We learned
Yeah.
about them
Yeah.
in school. I mean, I know that kids have to go to health classes and
Yeah.
biology and all of these, like, I
So
remember. I kind
to
of like.
to quote a book I read, an actual book, Ezra Klein's book, Why We're Polarized, one of the when he was trying to really answer that real question, you know, as far as American society writ large, you know, at least, and I, as quote someone who's quote unquote progressive and a liberal, oftentimes we've said part of the problem is lack of, we kind of talk about lack of knowledge, but more specifically lack of education. I said he quoted some studies that said that actually is not the reason why we're as polarized. That is to say, even when people have quote unquote the knowledge about it, they still are as entrenched as they are in their own particular beliefs, you know, what they already said. So I at least for me, and this is kind of a little bit based on some of the work I was doing as a university chaplain around cultural competency skills. I think the bottom line is people need to trust one another. Now, I think again, like we kind of talked about that, like we need to have trust in not just our own government, state, local, federal, but we need to be able to trust each other as fellow citizens. This conversation cannot contain what needs to happen for that. But I do think the next step, once you know, automatically, well, not automatically, but
No,
begin
it
to
didn't. I'm
trust,
sorry.
yeah, but begin to trust one another. I think it's about having dialogue, not about having a discussion, and damn sure not having a debate with one another. But when I can actually sit and talk to somebody else and actually, why do you feel this way? Like, share a story as to how did you come to this conclusion? Like, what, like, how have we arrived? How have you arrived here? Now, I understand that's, you know, that's outside of the political sphere and outside of legislation. Like, these things can be a little bit separate for me and or need to do different things. But that's also how you build trust. You know, that I can actually talk to my
I
neighbor.
mean, and to be honest with you, I honestly that's also my method of
Yeah,
evangelism. You know, in
yeah,
Christianity, I
seriously,
don't think
yeah.
that altar calls are really.
No, but
So I
you know,
think
it's
starting with having dialogue and conversation is the key to so much. I think it's also a key to harmony and success of
yeah,
living amongst people that you disagree with, right? But you build that confidence and you can build that trust. You know, I think you're more apt to do something, especially if you. And I think this may help. You know, it's always good, and in this season, people are starting to expand their circles. You're meeting more people, and
Yeah,
sometimes you're meeting people online. People are meeting, to your point, Clubhouse. They're meeting in these spaces, and they're taking these relationships. Um, I think it's important to keep to make sure that you're not the smartest person in the room. You should
yeah,
continue to
yeah.
do that, and I think that's a step that people can take, because if you realize, and sometimes people don't realize that they are this person, but if you realize that you are the person that every time you speak, you're the person that is the only person that has the information,
Yeah.
you're the person that gives all the information, and you never think that you're wrong. It's time for some more friends. It's time to
Yeah.
expand. Um,
I think it's even on a bigger level though. Like, and it's not just that in your own circles of friends, but it's about this idea that, and this is going to sound a little Obama-ish, but hopefully I'm going to go a step further than what our brother has done on some things about Middle America. But it's the idea that somebody in middle of Kansas needs to also recognize that someone who lives in New York is also their neighbor. It's also their fellow citizen.
not
Um,
their enemy. I agree.
and
I
not
agree.
their enemy, and vice versa. That, and I was, let me put this personal for me, that I, as a black man who's most familiar in urban context, I also somehow need to, at least on some basic level, acknowledge that I have a fellow citizen, that lives in the panhandle of Texas, or that lives, somewhere in rural Mississippi, who does not have the same skin color as me. I ain't got to vote with you, I ain't got to agree with you, but like, I need to be able to
Well,
trust that this
I
citizenship thing is working on some level.
I think on a personal note, I actually totally agree with you. Um, I think I also identify with more people that have a more urban experience, it's that's by choice. I have country roots, right? So I think that, and most Black people do, Black Americans, that I feel like I can tap in and identify. But I can pinpoint earlier this year when I went on vacation and I was driving through like rural Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
and I really questioned why these people would be voting on the same things that I'm voting on. Right? I think that
Mhm.
was like, but I had to also come to grips with, they do, right? We are one. So unfortunately and fortunately, the country is this large. Um, and
It's
so
huge.
somebody that lives in Hershey, Pennsylvania, um, or Dothan, Alabama, rural Lexington, Kentucky, is voting on the same things that I'm voting on, and the same issues. And so I have to see them, even when I don't want to, and vice versa. So I think you said that beautifully. I think as we close this out, the advice that I would give you, or the advice, what advice do you have for people that are anxious or have some confusion surrounding taking the vaccine, um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and
In
they're a little
closing,
apprehensive just because of
yeah,
what
and
they've seen and what they feel.
I would say trust the president-elect. Trust that there is an administration that is coming into office that cares about the American public, that deeply cares about those who have lost their lives already to this, cares about the surviving family members, cares about scientists, cares about public health, and wants the best, physical health for everyone who lives currently in this country. Joe Biden just took the vaccine on live television. That is enough for me, and I hope that will be enough for the rest of the American public.
I mean, I think I saw that, and I also watched Mike Pence take it. And so
And Lindsey Graham.
I think I didn't see that one. I think that hearing that you can trust somebody is what people need to hear right now. And I also think that we need to be encouraging some of these people that we are expecting to step up to also do things like this, right? So, pastor, black
Yep.
pastor, the way that you can help your community is to become learned on this, and learn the context, learn the history, and also be the example. And I think that that's what we have to ask for. I think the moment that we continue to rely on society or TikTok to be the conduit that explains why people should do something, or talking heads on a platform, people that you don't know and can't see on a social platform. You know, I've been in some very interesting clubhouse rooms, and if you're getting all of your knowledge, that's your new knowledge source. You need to check. You need to check it. You just need to double check, right? So my encouragement is really for community leaders. If you in that same vein, I'm going to encourage some people to become community leaders, because I don't think we do that enough. But community leaders, and so there are so many people that have the influence and they are genuine with their intentions, right? So the community that you've built, like young brother, young sister, you've built a community of people that follow you on health tips. You know, get informed and then be that mouthpiece. And I think it is incumbent on us to really start to encourage each other to rise up and rise to the occasion, and really do what Black people have had to do for generations and decide to lead. Like, I think we just have to, and this is difficult, right? Because I think we've talked about this in other ways, and it affects other things, right? You know, you've got a generation of millennials that's not slated to own their first home until they're 60, because you've got generations that have not moved out of the way. These people can't move into middle management or senior management because you won't move out of the way. But you also won't move out of the way, and you also won't lead, right? So you're not leading, you're not progressive, you can't think past 1975 or 1985 or 1995, whichever category you fit in. You're not leading. And so now we have to find people that will lead, and or encourage the leaders that we have. And it's not going to look like it always looked, and it never does. But I think that's as far as I can go, right? Texting my people and friends that I know that are councilmen and becoming mayors and stepping into these positions, like, do more. Every time I get a call from a pastor friend that's like, I have to say this, and what should I say? First of all, I hate that they call me to ask me.
Okay, for the record,
never take
first of all,
my advice.
I get those calls too. Yes, and I'm like, I told you what to say. I gave you my advice. You did not listen. Why are you angry?
I have
I don't
literally given it to you. I really am telling you what to say. If you're not going to say it in hopes to keep your job, like, sometimes, you have to say the right thing. And so I think that's my piece of encouragement. If people take anything from this, is that it's not the cakewalk that we thought we were walking into. This is not I can tell you that my 30s look nothing like I thought they would look, or what I anticipated them to look based on examples that were before me, or what I studied. Like, the way, it's just not there. And so getting over that and deciding to move forward in that, I think what it is right for me right now is just being this mouthpiece, right? And so this goes where it needs to go. Some days it seems for me to fall flat, and then a week later it's gone somewhere. And so I have to stay there. Like, right now, it's not my I'm not, and this is also for people that are in my inbox, I am not supposed to be a pastor or a pastor right now. It's not. I'm not supposed to be the mayor. I'm not supposed to be any of that. You are listening to this because this is what I'm supposed to do. And I think there are a lot of people that are in positions like that. You have the influence, you have the knowledge, and you're sitting on it out of fear or frustration, or you're waiting on, and it's also, we've been conditioned to wait on people. And I think time is up. So
I couldn't. I could not have said it better.
That's that. I don't know how many more cabinets we'll have this year, but I'm looking to having some great things and more in 2021. How's the rest of your year looking? We'll wrap up on a lighter note.
Yeah, I have done my best
Now,
to
let me
quarantine.
clarify.
Oh,
I'm not anticipating 2021. I'm not doing
oh,
that.
I have no
Um,
prognostications for 2021 at this point.
no, I have
Yeah,
no plans. I have no hopes. I do not have.
yeah,
Yeah, no.
I have quarantined to the best of my ability in terms of like not going out, just going to the grocery store. I do plan to go home and see my parents. I've only seen them once calendar year of 2020 due to the pandemic, and so it'll be just me and my parents over the Christmas holiday, and I will return back to where I live full time in Boston before the new year. So that is my holiday plans.
Okay, that's dope. I will actually. I attempted to see my parents over Thanksgiving, and they were positive for COVID-19. So,
Mm,
um, I'm not taking any risks. I'll be right here in New York City, and I will see
yeah,
them on a video platform.
yeah.
And we will-
I mean, like, that's what, like, yeah. I didn't travel for Thanksgiving. Uh, I will do my best and try to maintain as safe as possible. I understand it's a risk. There's no safe thing except to stay locked up in my house and have my groceries delivered. I understand that, but I hope your
no, I
parents
mean I get it.
are well right
I
now.
have not done anything. I'm actually out ordered groceries this morning. I feel like again, I don't even know when I'm going back to a grocery store because it just doesn't that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you for coming through. And of course, more of well, the cabinet will always be a part of the nation.
Sure.
Find him everywhere, the uppity Negro,
Yep. On
and
all platforms,
all platforms.
including Clubhouse now.
We're gonna have a clubhouse discussion in 2021.
Sure.
Because I don't have collective thoughts yet, but I do have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts,
I agree
but
with you on that. Yes, they're not collected yet, but yes,
I don't.
they're thoughts.
It's not. But we will do that. All right. And that's going to do it for the cabinet today and actually the nation. Of course, you can follow us everywhere on Muted Nation. You can follow me on Twitter, Alex Unmuted, and the nation continues. Right. Remember, today is greater. Believe it, speak it, and live it. You have to make the choice to be great. Your situation is not your destination, so please make it your motivation. I will see you next time right here on Unmuted Nation.